Wow, what a great crowd. I'm so excited to be back at day one. It's always a thrill to have these conversations. And this is a really good substantive one. We don't have a lot of time to waste, so I'm going to go up the line here and have each of our guests, each of our panelists, offer a brief introduction, name, rank, serial number. I urge each of you not to take 10 minutes, because if each of you do, we're done. That's it. That's all the time we have. So why don't we start with you, Heather?
Great, thank you. I'm Heather Ostrowski. I'm the Global Benefits Director at Keysight Technologies, located in Northern California, in Santa Rosa, California. We are a testing and measurement company with just over 16,000 lives globally. I'm super excited to be with this panel of experts to be able to talk about one of my favorite topics of well-being. I have what I think is an interesting background where my first 20 years of my career was in finance, and I love the intersection between finance and human resources, and especially employee benefits, where we can really dig into the data and analytics around whether it's a business strategy and objectives, but marrying that with where are there gaps for employees and how can we find those gaps through the data and analytics, and then having both sides have a great ROI.
I am Kristin Wood. I head up strategic initiatives for Blue Shield of California. Similar to Heather, I started with Blue Shield in healthcare after about 20 years in finance. So I had also been in HR, but I joined healthcare because I really wanted to help serve a mission and a purpose and make sure that we're helping others with healthcare. And I love the intersectionality of healthcare and wellness and being able to make sure that we can serve more Californians. So I was really excited about 5 years ago when I joined Blue Shield because we were really focused on the well-being of our members and the communities that we serve. And I thought that was something that was really important to me, having moved from finance over to healthcare. So thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm Supriya Bahari, and I lead Total Rewards at Roblox globally. And I've spent most of my career in compensation and benefits. And what I'm really passionate about is how to upend the norm in compensation and benefits. Coming from a computer science degree, I channelized my experience in comp and benefits to focus on how do we provide the right systems. So yes, there's an intersection of benefits and well-being in finance, but there's also an intersection with systems. And just a short while ago, they said Gen Z has overtaken the baby boomers, and that is why we really need to focus on providing tools at the fingertips of our people so they can thrive.
And my name is Guy Renwick. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Modern Health. My background's always been within healthcare and technology companies. I joined Modern Health 3 years ago. Modern Health is a global mental health platform that supports employees and their families all across the world. And we believe in full spectrum mental health care, that everyone should invest in their mental health, both on the reactive and preventative side. And investing so is the right thing to do for your employees, but it's also the right thing to do for society and has a financial return on top of that as well, too. So excited to be here today and join this panel.
Now, it's not going to be the case with most of the questions here that all of you need to answer each one, but all of you need to answer this first one, or perhaps I should say second, which is, Guy, why don't we start with you? What would you identify as the top trend in mental health care, specifically in 2024, and why?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, and we support families and loved ones all across the world, and I think to me that's what I'm really seeing now is this really investment in mental health for full family support. Yeah, I'm a father of 4, and I think we saw it throughout the pandemic, and I think even the return post-pandemic, the impact that had on our families and our children across the world. And I think as we return to society, I think we deal with isolation issues, we deal with anxiety, we deal with depression. And I think as kids are evolving, frankly, in this digital age and in this society, I think we're seeing a really unfortunate increase of depression, anxiety with our adolescent populations. I think there's all sorts of stats today around suicidal rates going up at an all-time high. And I think to me, it's an important piece of society we need to think about. If you look at that's our future generation that will be entering the workforce. And so how we take care of children and adolescents around the world and really think about full family health. I think people underestimate the impact it has when you have a child or a dependent that's going through a mental health crisis. what impact does that have on our employees? You look at the amount of times people are missing work to actually stay home and take care of their loved ones and their families. And so if you look at full family health, we think that's an important piece to invest in, but also an unfortunate trend that we're seeing that as a society, we need to have better support and resources to take care of those folks.
Supriya?
So, coming from growing up, I've never heard of the term mental health. It was like you got to do or die. And it was not until I spent years in benefits that I realized how important mental health is. And the way I see it in 2024 is employees or candidates, whoever you are looking at, they are prioritizing their lives. They're not taking offers that are going to destroy the mental health. Just yesterday we were at dinner and we were talking about people who work at investment firms, and it was very clear that's a life they've chosen, but they do see burnout very early in life. And I strongly believe life is a marathon and not a sprint. So we absolutely have to focus on living a balanced life, and I have been seeing more and more that the newer generations are focused on holistic well-being, not just physical, financial, emotional, and mental, all of it.
Kristin?
I think for right now, there's a huge focus for us on all of the different types of products and services that could be available to folks and how to easily access them. So when it comes to AI or to digital services, there's a lot of opportunity available to folks to get better access to care. So I'm super intrigued from a mental health perspective on how individuals can easily access that and readily access that care. I think there's products and services that are starting to come out, and we're just at the cusp of that. So I'm really intrigued by what AI and data and analytics and digital will do from a mental health perspective so that more folks have the opportunity to access that care in an affordable way.
Heather?
So going last on the panel, I can't just say ditto, because those are all great answers. And I also really want to weigh in on accessibility. I think that's the trend, the main trend that I'm seeing in 2024. We're seeing a lot of out-of-network providers from our employees trying to find care. It's really hard to go through your regular medical plan. And then in addition to that type of accessibility, the different generations really want to access it differently. So some may want the apps and the tools to be able to through their phone. Some may want in person. Some may want to have videos. And there's a variety of tools that our employees would like to be able to use. So I think it's the accessibility that's kind of the main trend. But then how do you also pair that with the other main trend of 2024 where all the companies are cutting costs? And so one way that we found to kind of dig into this was to look at how much are we spending on our self-funded plan on our prescriptions, but people aren't seeing providers. So if you're being prescribed anxiety medication, yet you've never been able to talk to somebody about that, how can we really support that? And what tools can we bring in so employees can start having less leaves, less medication? So it's a win for the company, of course, but for the employees mostly, being able to finally kind of have that breath of, oh, there's somebody that I can talk to, and it's going to be provided by the company.
So interesting. I hear a couple buzzwords in this round of answers: AI, accessibility, and we're gonna be digging into that. Speaking of which, Supriya, you get to kick us off on this next question. So many companies seem to be outsourcing mental health to third-party apps. I think somebody mentioned phones, right? And I'm curious, has your company done this? And what's been your experience so far about the benefits and the risks?
Yeah, that's a great question. And let's start with outsourcing. I think mental health is one of those things, even if I brought a therapist into the office every week, you don't want to be seen by other employees that you're going and visiting that therapist. Okay? So confidentiality is key when it comes to your mental health and how you're handling and coping with to be resilient. To me, outsourcing was a very good solution. One, it kept the patient confidentiality even beyond what the regular, what we can offer in the office. But we instituted a program last year which provided mental health services throughout the world any part of the world, basically, and from the age of 2. So I was very intrigued when they said from the age of 2. I don't think 2-year-olds can even talk properly, but they can express their stress. And being a mother of 2, I've realized over the years that your stress levels start to rise even when you're a child, whether they can express it in words or not. This program has been very well received in the US, North America, of course, but it's actually, we've received a lot more kudos from countries where mental health has not been a priority. And for them, it is like, wow, our employers are prioritizing mental health, even though it is still a taboo in their society, they're able to find that channel and seek, whether it is therapy or whether it is talking to a psychiatrist for their mental health issues. When you talk of apps, I think app is just one of the things, but it is beyond apps, as Kristin said. It has in-person, video, or texting, whatever you choose. So based on your generation and lifestyle, you can adapt to utilizing that service the way you need. Overall, when we look at the ROI for this, in 1 year, we have seen a reduction in sick time off as well as leaves. And we have seen our eNPS score, which we measure on a 6-monthly basis, go up significantly. The key to being productive is being happy, being healthy. So if, as employers, we can provide the resources for people to take care of their health, wealth, happiness, then we are going to get the full productivity from our employees. And I'm going to close this out by saying, we think of treating every employee like an athlete. How do you get the highest performance from your athlete? And we are trying to create more proactive benefit programs that are bringing out the highest productivity from our employees.
Wonderful. Anybody want to add to that, or should we just keep going along? Heather, why don't I have you kick off the next question? Given my repertorial focus, I'm always worried about privacy. Who gets to see this information? You know, what about cybersecurity risks? Has that been taken into account? Do you find your workforce worried about sharing mental health challenges with company management?
That's a great question. I think that it's a complicated question as well, because it depends on the training really that you have for managers as well. So we have a number of layers of trainings that can occur, whether it's employee manager training, that's a confidential conversation. There should be privacy rules that are around that. If we're expanding that to the apps or to the different platforms, and then that goes into the kind of the contracting and what has been looked at for the cybersecurity or for the AI, and what type of controls you have around that. And I think having the different levels of, I guess, of the privacy checks of, is a manager uncomfortable with the conversation, and then where do they go next? And ensuring that the company kind of has a playbook for that to really understand where the next steps would be. And then I think one other place that's a really safe place that we've found is through a provider where they have a variety of solutions. So the manager can then kind of refer them to this company where you can have a therapist or a coach or even peer groups, or you can have somebody kind of come in and do a roundtable if it's a topic where you're finding a number of your employees may be feeling uncomfortable or want to talk about something, but they're okay to talk in a group setting together, because it does build a lot of community as well. But taking that back to the privacy question, ensuring that the person that's either moderating or part of the conversation really understands kind of the rules of the road for those conversations.
Let's talk about the pandemic and the massive workforce turnover that accompanied it. The concurrent hiring surge, I think we remember that, and the mass layoffs that followed the hiring surge. It strikes me that many companies have not really come back from all of that, especially in terms of reestablishing a healthy, happy corporate culture. Am I wrong about that, Kristin?
I think, unfortunately, you're not wrong about it for a lot of companies, right? I think we were just talking about that with the fireside chat and with a lot of companies that have been just struggling with that, particularly in technology and in the space around us in this area. I feel really fortunate because we in healthcare were able to really move past that and be able to provide a lot of jobs during that time. So we have been really working to grow during that time. The pandemic was a horrible time for a lot of people, and it was a time where we could reimagine healthcare. And so when we think about that, it was a time of significant growth in the healthcare industry because we really needed to think about how to disrupt healthcare and how to make change. So there were jobs growing at that time for some of our industries when there were job loss in a lot of other industries. So it's a struggle in that area, but there were jobs that had grown in that time or were retained in that time, but at the same time need to be thought about differently or reimagined because the work needs to be done differently. So how we did the work prior to this point is a little different than how we needed to do it on a go-forward basis as a result.
It's a great point. Anybody else have anything they want to add? I know this is like a pop quiz, the students, and this is the final. Let's talk about the different subsets within the workforce. Recent college grads, family formers, workaholics, I guess that's me, those nearing retirement. How do you meaningfully support each group just, beyond just creating a Slack channel? Heather, do you want to kick us off there?
Yeah, this is a great question. I love this question because we really do have such a varied population throughout different companies. And so when you really dig into the different generations, you can see that there's different solutions and problems to solve for each of them. So for instance, as we're looking at our population at Keysight, we've been noticing we're aging, but at the same time, we're bringing in the Gen Z population that we talked about a little bit earlier that have two completely different needs, although they have one intersection as well. So our aging population, that's me, I'm looking at, I need elder care coordination, but I also might need some childcare help. And I think that goes to the sandwich generation that we've talked about as well. So they overlap so much. So being able to really recognize for our employees, how can we help support them so this one tool that I was describing where it has elder care, child care, it also have different resources for coordination, healthcare coordination, to help ease our employees' load and stress. But then also when we look at other areas of the generations of financial stability, for instance, what path are you on? So let's provide a tool where are you on the path? Are you ready to retire? Are you not anywhere close to retiring? You can go through each of these personas to really have some training, have some education to help you along the financial stability road. And then I think the last area that I would speak to, again, would be back to that tool that I spoke to earlier. That's a mental health tool where, depending on your generation, where are you most comfortable? Is it through an app or is it in person? So I think it's really digging into and recognizing throughout your population what are the needs for the different generations at that time and how can you best support them?
So, Geyer?
Go ahead. Yeah, one thing I want to do as well, I think when we look at across different workforces that we support, it's also, I think the modalities are important, whether it's an app, whether it's a phone, whether it's in person, but also how you speak about a topic like mental health to your workforce, I think is also incredibly interesting. We actually signed a partnership last year with Harley Davidson, which to me was a really interesting demographic that, if you imagine kind of the spectrum of people adopting mental health solutions, I'd probably put Harley Davidson pretty late on that adoption curve around that. And what's interesting is when we launched our Harley Davidson, we intentionally did not talk about see a therapist, see a mental health provider. In some ways, you're going to alienate a population by doing that. What we did is we actually said, what is the topic that every Harley Davidson owner, or frankly, every person that's been on a bike experiences, falling off the bike for the first time, and what is it like to get back on the motorcycle at that next point? We actually found a mental health coach that actually was a Harley Davidson or themselves had gone through that experience. And we led a whole discussion really about what was PTSD, anxiety, obviously a lot of trauma, but reality, all we were talking about is what is it like to get back on your bike again, which it was like the most widely adopted We did a group experience we call Circles with them, where we brought Harley-Davidson employees across the company together and just talked about that experience. And for so many folks, that was their first ever interaction with a mental health provider. And from that, now we brought them in to see therapists, or we brought them in to see coaches, or we've continued them in different modalities like that. But that was a really interesting way to think about how do you reach a population with something that resonates and not just put mental health front and center, where you alienate, in that case, a significant portion of their population.
Supriya?
So I think, yes, the conversations have been around mental health. The way I would talk about the different personas is they're different lifestyles. Okay, so somebody who's a new college grad doesn't understand that I need to invest in 401k early on. They suddenly see that big paycheck, which they, right out of college, you suddenly start seeing $10,000 in your bank account every month. And in the tech industry, you all know, we see that a lot. And they don't have the financial wisdom as to how to invest early. They are somewhere suffering from a little bit of loneliness because they may have come from a different part of the country. Living alone is a new skill they have to adapt to. We often see that our younger population doesn't go for regular physical checkups. So I think it is about looking at different lifestyles and educating those different lifestyles based on what is apt for your scenario. In addition to that, I'm a very strong believer of equitable benefits. So what we introduced recently at Roblox is a lifestyle spending account where every employee will get the same amount of money. But my need may be elder care, whereas your need may be child care, and somebody else may want to invest in going to the gym, or somebody may want to work from home equipment. So now it almost feels like we've leveled the playing field, because for years, most of these benefits were for mothers with children, or parental leaves, of course, are still in place, but they were very geared towards families. And we know that today, the percentage of people in families is smaller than the percentage of people without families. So overall, I think the different personas ask us to rethink how we structure our benefits plans without removing the family forming needs and the benefits that you give, but how do you create more sense of equity? So
I love that
is what we're
idea,
focused
equity, right? So it's possible to meet each person where they are, and for no one group to feel, hey, why am I not in your target sites in terms of providing service? Kristin?
Yeah, this one's near and dear to my heart because we just created a generations employee resource group last year. So we have 5 generations of employees working for us, soon to be 6. And I think we had a lot of bias in the company about what folks believe each generation to know or not know, or to believe or not believe, or how they're going to use their benefits, or their mental health beliefs or disbeliefs. And I think breaking down those biases was really important. And the shared understanding and the belief and the knowledge share that could be used. So not just intersectionality about we're different because of these things across our generations, but how can we actually learn from one another? That was really critical for us. And I think where folks are, so not just family systems, but caregiving seem to be really important for us. So you may or may not have actual, children or a spouse or a domestic partner or those types of things, but you may be caring for someone. And I think that was really important for us to focus on from a mental health perspective. Or maybe you are on your own, particularly during COVID, and we needed to focus on those things from mental health. And so that shared understanding really started to help us a lot so that we could have just a common dialogue across the organization.
Geir, here we are in a world where we're just beginning to address the whole human being, not just the employee in a workforce. Enter AI. I'm curious how you're seeing this begin to roll out in your company, if at all.
Yeah, I definitely will say, every conversation, every panel I'm on, I feel like AI comes up as a topic, and I will say very directly, it's super important. We look at it as ways that we augment the way our providers can interact with our members. We have AI set in the back end, understanding sentiment from some of our virtual interactions, and then we inform our providers what we can glean from that. We use it internally in terms of how we make operational teams more efficient. We use it on our outreach around it. I think it's incredibly important as a way to augment the level of care. I'm also very critical. It's not the right care for a lot of folks around there. The reality is, like, with someone with deep clinical depression that needs to be on medication, to put an AI solution only in front of them is frankly clinically irresponsible in terms of like the level of support they need. That being said, we also look at ways that we actually create customized digital content based on that individual experience with that provider that is powered through AI. And that to me is a really powerful way where if I can get you to see a therapist on a weekly basis, what are you doing every other day of the week? How are you engaging with whether it's digital content or other ways on a daily basis? I always use the analogy, we all brush our teeth twice a day, you floss every night. You don't wait to have a cavity and say, oh, I'm gonna take care of my teeth. Some way I think we approach mental health in a way that's somewhat like that. We wait for a critical event and we say we invest in mental health. So to me, AI is a powerful tool to augment that experience. I would be very direct, it's not appropriate for all people, and it's definitely not appropriate as the only level of care as you get to higher acuity members.
Anybody else want to chime in?
I'm completely aligned with that. I think that it needs to be, if we look at patient-centered care and you put the patient at the, or the customer or the employee at the center of it, it depends on where you're meeting that person, right? So AI might augment in between sessions, or it may help to facilitate giving tools and resources and a shared understanding, or it may help someone start their process if they're not comfortable going to see someone yet. But I don't know that any one thing is the right answer yet. It's more about meeting someone where they are on their journey.
Now, you knew I couldn't get through this conversation without mentioning Elon Musk at least once. Supriya, he infamously demands his employees be extremely hardcore, to put everything aside for work, no matter the cost, personally speaking. Do you think Musk is the aberration in corporate America today or the inspiration in Silicon Valley and beyond?
So you can see me smiling because I'm chuckling that I'm answering this question. So any Tesla or SpaceX employees, apologies in advance.
Twitter? Yeah,
Twitter,
X as well, yeah.
X now. So apologies in advance. But I do think it's an aberration. Here is why. First and foremost, leading with care is very important. I cannot tell you how many of my team members have received, even in today's market, are receiving calls from recruiters saying that, hey, I can get you head of benefits here. I'm not going to name the companies. And yesterday we were just chatting and over Slack, and he sent me a screenshot. No, I actually declined it because he says, fortunately, I'm very happy working where I am. It's a very old saying that people join companies but leave managers. So at Roblox, one of our core values is leading with care and respect, okay? So, and that is instituted in everything we do. It's really important for us to remember, again, I know I'm repeating myself here, that life is a marathon, not a sprint. You may have, you are able to do certain things at a certain pace for a short period of time, but in the long term, you have a very long life where you need to maintain this body and brain to be cohesive. Okay, so I don't agree with at all. I should say not even partially, but I completely disagree with the strategy that Elon Musk has taken. And it is super important for people to be happy, feel safe, feel confident, because that is when they are going to be creative and give you their best. So net answer is it's an aberration.
One thing just to give Elon a little bit credit to, so Twitter was actually a customer of Modern Health for several years as well. When Elon took over, there was a significant scrutiny of every single benefit they had over at Twitter or X now, and literally he had to prove every single benefit that was going to keep going afterwards. To give him credit, we are still a customer, or Modern Health is still being used by Twitter employees, so I absolutely agree that that's not the sentiment we want, but also to be very clear, like, even in that culture, they're taking an investment to say they want to take care of their mental health of their employees. Even Tesla and SpaceX also have a mental health solution similar to ours in place around that too. And so, again, I'm not condoning at all the mentality around that, but it's interesting to see that in that case, that leader actually still invested. He still did invest in a mental health solution. And in some ways, especially at Twitter, as they went through significant change and significant turmoil, we actually saw adoption obviously increase from an actual percentage perspective because we could actually provide a solution like ours in place to take care of employees throughout that period of time. And so to me, it was at least interesting as a leader, still an investment that he decided to make in a solution like ours.
I'll just add to that, yes, I like, that's a really good stand that is taken, but I also think that the hardcore piece renders itself to having a program for mental health.
In other words, Musk might be creating the conditions that lead people to access mental health care. Just wanted to make sure that was clear. Do either of you, Heather or Kristin, want to weigh in, or you're like, no, we'll still steer clear?
I'm not going to get a job with anyone.
Supriya's got guts. I think that's extremely hardcore. I do want to point out, I've got a couple more questions for our panel, but you might have some questions as well. And we did build in some time at the end of this hour for you to be able to ask those questions. So if you haven't already jotted down a note or two, you might want to start thinking about doing that now so that when we turn to you, you've got a question at the ready. So I guess, Heather, why don't we ask you this next one? You dodged the Musk question, but here's another toughie. There's been a number of news headlines warning of a massive rollback of commitments to DEI and gender equity at the C-suite level. And I'm curious whether you think this is on the nose or overblown.
I think it's overblown. I've not seen any data that supports the rollback of DE&I programs within corporations, and I'd love to hear afterwards if I'm incorrect with the population that's here. But really, we're gearing up for a Gen Z of about 25% of our workforce in 2025 that is going to be the most diverse generation in US history. And so I think that's something that companies really need to be looking at. But in addition, customers really want to work with a company that has DE&I at its forefront. So whether that's the C-suite, whether that's the managers, it's really important to be able to be recognizing and supporting the various cultural differences. And I think it also really shows to inclusiveness, where we recently had a webinar on inclusiveness by one of the program managers, and the feedback that we got was resounding, where there really is still a gap in knowledge around inclusiveness and what does that mean and how do we work together differently but to make it better. And it really, I thought that was one of the best outcomes that we have would be the webinars, kind of inclusivity. But I'm definitely not seeing, at least in the data that I've looked at, any sort of cutbacks in DE&I.
Kristin, we heard Supriya say something that I think resonates for a lot of people in the workforce. There's so much attention given to the leadership emanating from the C-suite, but most employees' experience of their company tends to focus on their direct supervisor, or maybe also the boss one level up beyond that. How much they resonate or don't resonate with that person and their management style and the way that they conduct themselves as a human being. What proactive steps does your company take to make sure those working relationships are working?
Yeah, we take a lot of steps because people don't leave jobs, they leave leaders. So I think it's really critical. So we talk about leadership at all levels. We don't talk about culture. We put in leadership programs from our board of directors through our interns. So when we think about that, we have leadership programs, we have a leadership model. So we think about leadership in really 4 key ways: results leadership, thought leadership, people leadership, and personal leadership. those are critical to our business functioning. And we think about that from interviews, through how we assess talent, through how we just conduct ourselves day to day, whether it's our learning or for diversity, equity, and inclusion. We think about leadership at all levels, and we think about being representative of diversity, equity, and inclusion at all levels. So we're only as diverse as the communities that we serve if we really want to serve those communities well. So we really integrate leadership at all levels, and then we put scores and scorecards in our work in place so that folks are actually really held accountable to that. And we do that through engagement surveys, and we do that through scorecards and people strategy, and we do that throughout the year, and then we do it through performance reviews and pay. That's, if you don't really put your money where your mouth is, it's not really there. So I think that that's super important.
Anyone else want to jump
I
in?
would align with what Kristin said. What we do is we do a 6-monthly upward feedback survey. So I only get the results of my upward feedback from my direct reports after I close calibration, so that it does not bias our performance review of our people. And I think it's really important to seek regular feedback from people. How do they really like working with you? It has to be done in a manner where they feel safe. So we work with a third party, and it's not only anonymous, it is confidential also. So people can really say, hey, I see this area of growth in my manager. And area of growth is not something that should only be identified by a manager for their direct report. It should be both ways. So these upward feedback survey results, like I have everybody on my direct reports who are managers, and my manager has mine. This is absolutely factored in when they do my performance evaluation. Okay, so that's one channel of continuously measuring how are people excited, are you being a responsible manager, are you leading as an inspiration. The second thing we do is also manager feedback trainings, because a lot of managers still struggle with providing feedback to their people. They will not provide feedback, and then there is a surprise during the performance evaluation. That is not a culture we adopt. So we have monthly manager feedback training. So if you're thinking that, hey, I need to give this feedback to this person, because it's a monthly training, you go to that and you practice it there. So that's another avenue. And then, of course, for new managers, we have a complete people management training.
Well, sorry, we just have like literally less than 3 minutes, so I do want to ask, does anybody have a question they want to put to this panel? I don't want to monopolize. Yes, you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, by the way, for, hello. Thank you, by the way, for all the panelists and your insights. Being in technology and doing it for many decades now, the long hours is pervasive and systemic and not going away. And also span of control of the managers. Like you have some managers just, you can't handle 20 direct reports. And so you can have all the benefits that you want, and many of the companies here bring the benefits to you, to your campus. But when it comes to the long hours and not really having access and the one-to-ones regular with your managers, those seem like hard problems to fix. And I'm just curious, your thoughts and maybe some of the things you're doing.
Yeah, I can speak as to, so I think, we see a lot across our organizations of what they're doing to support frontline managers. And sometimes frontline managers, to me, are almost acting times as therapists and coaches and say the HR and people teams on top of people managers, I think have individually probably have one of the hardest jobs today. I think a lot of what we see is two things. Is one, how do you equip or enable your managers to have the resources so they don't have to be and step in and be a therapist or a coach or a mentor? They can do those things as part of being a manager, but like how do you at some point have other resources available? We also believe a lot in, we talk about, for our experience in modern health, like we talk about executive coaching is really in some ways only usually designed for like your C-suite or your VPs. We believe in this element, everyone should have a coach. And part of our offering is actually bringing coaching beyond mental health coaching to actually career development coaching. So we have entire curriculums and entire products specifically designed, for example, for new managers. And what is it like to become a new manager? And we actually do really cool things where we bring cohorts of new managers across an organization. You start to build somewhat of a community across the population that are all struggling with that same topic. And actually, what are you doing as an organization to support them? And so in some ways, like we can be an augmentation to the core curriculum that's designed for managers, But in some ways, bringing that out of the direct employer experience to a third party like ourselves also starts to create this safe space where they can actually have a conversation and talk about what are the struggles they're facing, what are the challenges they're facing being a new manager, and how do you support that population throughout that journey.
Do we have time for one more question, or we got to wrap up? Oh, yes, all right. Let's see, I think I see a hand raised over there. Here comes the mic.
This is more in reference to benefits and the healthcare system. Do you guys see a trend in, so you look at the whole person, mental health, you look at caregiving, you look at caring for a family and so on, but then we've noticed, I come from a school district, people are now asking about caring for pets, you know, like insurance, like other aspects of insurance, other aspects of benefits that we didn't think about in the future. Have you seen any upward trends and requests for that? And how are you managing that or thinking about that in the future?
We have pet insurance, that's for sure. That's been a big topic of discussion. And we've done other things, like we've brought pets to work. That was a big debate, like a 3-year debate, which I was a little surprised by. We've had to get a lot more creative, and I think it is meeting folks where they are and with what needs they have. So I joke about the pet thing, but it was like a hot topic, and it became something that was really critical for folks, particularly when they spent multiple years at home. And I think more broadly than that, it was how are we going to work in this new environment when we just provided autonomy and flexibility to folks. And we do have work where it needs collaboration and connectedness, and we have critical frontline workers, and we have all these things that require folks to be back in locations. So it's really meeting folks where they are and starting to provide benefits more creatively than those traditional benefits that were just like, here you go, and you may never use them, but we've provided you benefits. So I think that's been a lot more about the pulse surveys and things like that of like, what benefits do folks actually need? Digital conversations and AI have been critical for that, because folks can answer questions and it can trigger other things to help us to actually build better benefits plans.
That's a really wonderful note to end this panel on. We have no more time left, but I do want you to join me in thanking Heather and Kristin and Supriya and Guy. They've just been fantastic today.